Today we're going to be talking about truth default theory. This theory helps explain why people are not usually very good at detecting lies and why deception can actually be more successful than people think. Truth default theory was developed by Timothy Levine, and the main idea is pretty simple. Most people naturally assume other people are telling the truth, unless something gives them a reason to doubt it.
What is truth default theory? This theory helps explain why we naturally trust others in everyday communication and conversation. According to this theory, we generally assume that people are being honest with us unless something causes us to question them. This theory also explains why deception is often successful. It's because most people, while we're having these casual conversations, we're not actively looking for the dishonesty, so these dishonest messages can go unnoticed.
One of the biggest concepts in truth default theory is something called the truth default. This basically means people naturally believe others are being honest.
Suspicion usually develops only after there's a trigger, such as inconsistent behavior, unusual actions, or overall evidence that something's just not adding up or making sense.
The theory also explains why people are generally not great lie detectors. A lot of the time, people rely more on assumptions and trust than actual evidence.
Jumping into our theory predictions, starting off with our first theory, which predicts that most communications begins with trust. In everyday interactions, people usually assume honesty, then rather jumping to conclusions and questioning others. Second, people don't constantly search for lies. Instead, suspicion only develops after there's a trigger present. Like I mentioned before, these triggers can include contradictions, nervous behaviors or actions, or overall just information that's inconsistent or the timeline's just really not adding up. The theory also predicts that deception is more likely to succeed when there's no clear trigger present. If nothing appears suspicious, then why would we not believe the message? Another prediction is that trust tends to be stronger in close relationships, such as family, friends, or romantic partners. This is because there's more emotional connection, and this overall increases the assumption of honesty. Finally, people rely heavily on assumptions and perceptions instead of carefully analyzing evidence. Because of this, inconsistencies can slowly create doubt and eventually lead to suspicion.
One example of truth default theory can be seen in The Mole. At the beginning of the show, contestants mostly trust each other because there is no clear reason to be suspicious. But once someone starts acting inconsistently or something strange happens, people begin questioning who the mole actually is. That suspicious behavior acts as a trigger. I think this example works well because it shows how trust usually comes first, and doubt only happens after something changes.
Our application example is the movie Parasite. The wealthy family believes the Kim's fake identities because everything appears normal at first. As inconsistencies begin to appear, suspicion only develops. This directly connects to the truth default theory because the family is operating under a truth default state. They're not actively searching and looking for these deceptions, so this is why the lies continue successfully. As the story develops, the small inconsistencies and suspicious moments begin to appear, making them the triggers. The movie also connects to several communication concepts, including trusted relationships, perception, self-disclosure. Overall, Parasite perfectly demonstrates how easily deception can succeed when people assume honesty by default.
Another example of truth default theory can be seen in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. At first, most characters assume Professor Quirrell is trustworthy. Nobody immediately thinks he has bad intentions because trust is the default. But as strange things start happening, Harry begins noticing behaviors that seem inconsistent. Those inconsistencies act as triggers that slowly create suspicion. I think this example fits really well because it shows how people usually do not question someone's intentions until something feels off.
truth default theory connects closely to several concepts we have studied in interpersonal communications. Our first concept is perception. People often interpret messages as truthful because trust is our natural starting point in communication. The theory also relates to self-disclosure. When we share personal information, we usually expect honesty in return. Another important connection is trust in relationships. Healthy relationships depend heavily on assumed honesty. Without trust, communication becomes more difficult and relationships can weaken over time. Truth default theory connects to interpersonal communication as a whole because communication would be extremely challenging if people approached every interaction with suspicion. Trust allows conversations, relationships, and social interactions to function smoothly.
For our peer activity and discussion, we have a few options. The first option is a truth or lie activity where one student tells a story and the class tries to identify the moment they become suspicious or that something may not be true. The second option is a discussion about how relationships might change if people stopped assuming honesty and instead approached every interaction with suspicion. The third option is a reflection-based discussion where students share a time they believed someone who turned out to be lying and identify the specific trigger that changed their perception. The final option is a discussion about trust and judgment. When is it beneficial to assume people are telling the truth, and when that assumption can be harmful?